Okay, our first person was Steve Keller. Threw his hat in the ring and said, hey, I've got a question. Can you explain the best approach, a data view or a table, or to an updatable BAQ or something else, to add a UD updatable child table in Application Studio? In the classic view, we used wizards that would create code link to the child table, allow copy, paste, insert, add new. Also add a step if the user tabs off the last cell of the last row, a new UD row is created. He went ahead and sent over the sample code, and they have multiple rows of performance details for each line on the quote or the order, and attached this code snippet that they created in the classic view. And if that would help any of the chumps trying to figure this out, I went ahead and emailed that out to everybody, and I'll go ahead and throw this up on the screen here.
So as far as adding the child table, you can create a data view within App Studio, and there's a section called parent-child relationships to where you can link it to the parent view and add some columns to make that communicate back and forth. That part's fairly straightforward. You're going to have to add a new tool to save it, and then you're going to have to create an event to do a REST call to do the update to that UD table to actually commit it. As far as the tabbing off the last thing, I'm not sure that's actually possible in the current iteration. Tabs aren't really friendly in Kinetic at this point in time. You can't really control them as it's a function of the browser. And when you're in a grid, it doesn't really tab cell to cell. It will tab to the next control outside of the grid.
Now, any other questions that kind of answer what you were looking at, Steve?
That's not mine. Sorry. My question had to do with data directives, business objects, and that stuff. So my name got stuck to somebody else's.
Yowza.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh. Yeah.
Let me see if I can get that fixed up here. Brian Kennedy was the person with this question. It does not look like Brian Kennedy is on the line. Okay, so Steve's question. When building BPMs, you need to select a business object. Some are pretty straightforward, some are not. When you need to select a method, then determine pre, base, or post-processing. Where does anyone learn all this stuff? From my experience, you kind of learn it by doing it and keeping track of like epi users and stuff, attending meetings like this. There's not really good documentation on the programming side of things for this, for the business objects and stuff. So the REST services help is a huge help compared to what we did have, because at least you can find the methods there. And Reflector is also a wonderful tool for trying to work with things like that.
The trace logs also help when you're trying to figure out what's actually happening when you're actually doing it in the system in the GUI. That'll kind of identify what business object you need to use. And then outside of that, it becomes a lot of trial and error.
In Epic Web, there is a business object guide that actually tells you what each business object does ostensibly. It is part of the documentation that's available to you in Epic Web. But really, the trace is going to be your best friend there. Do a trace, and then basically that'll tell you what BO to use and what method to use if you're trying to mimic something that the system is doing. But if you just want to know what a business object does, there is a very handy CHM that Epicor does publish that tells you somewhat what most business objects do, and that's available in your download section in Epic Web.
And
yeah,
Andrews
that
asked a follow-on question. What is Reflector? And Andrus Reflector is a tool you can download if you do a Google search, Reflector or Redgate. I believe Redgate's the current owner of it, but it basically reverses the DLLs and you can get into the code, see what all's going on. JetBrains also has a tool called .peak that does the same thing.
Yeah, and JetBrains is free versus Reflector costs money, not if that matters, but Reflector is better though.
Nice.
The other one, I've been looking at the API calls in the REST services. When you select onto the REST service, it also tells you what it is, and then you can see the methods, and there's also a little write-up on what the different methods are. So you can also kind of find out from there what the different ones do for like order entry, purchase order entry, and it's for all of them, but the commentation or the notes that are over in the RESTful services is also a good place to look for that info.
Okay, and I did find Brian Kennedy. He is here. So Brian, I'm going to unmute you. If you want to unmute yourself, we can make sure that we answered your question.
All right, can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Wonderful. Well, some of what I'm trying to do is obviously have, a child table linked, but I have to be able to update it. And it sounded as though the person who was responding was, you can't really tab, but is there a way to add a new within that grid?
Yeah, you can add new, but it's more clicky based than the current iteration of Epicor. So you're not going to be able to tab and have it automatically create that row. You would have to click the new plus sign. And if it's a custom grid, you would have to wire up that new and all of that stuff yourself with a custom event. There aren't a lot of wizards. It's definitely not very friendly, but you can kind of look at what Epicor does with their own locked events and kind of go from there.
And then the paste update, paste insert, is that functional somewhat at this point?
Yeah, it's somewhat functional. You just got to make sure that on the panel card grid that you have the disable paste insert unchecked so that it allows it.
Sure.
And I think in your updatable BAQ, did you have to allow for multiple rows for the paste update to handle multiples?
You know, I'm unsure of that one, but it would make sense to me that yes, you should have that because I'm pretty sure it does dirty rows and then does the full update at the end.
So doing a data view using a updatable BAQ is still probably a good way to go for this.
I mean, you can do it that way, or else you can just use the regular UD table, and for your save events, use a REST call that updates the UD table directly.
Okay. One way is better than the other.
I mean, it's a horse apiece at this point. Whatever's easiest to get done, I would say is the best. Kinetic is a bit of a dumpster fire at the moment, so I mean, choose the easiest route.
I'm not too far from Kenosha.
Hey.
That's a different dumpster.
Yeah, and as they say, I mean, there's 10 ways to do almost everything in Epicor. It's just finding out which one has the perfect or the closest fit for the key or the solution that you're trying to build.
Sure.
Okay, the next one in the list was Tracy Winkleman over at Bruno, just a little bit west of you there. So they're encountering some issues when printing. They pull up an order, go to the sales order, go to print it. After printing, they go back to the order entry screen, go to another order, but when they go back to print, it's printing the old order. The print dialog that came up is actually holding the order number when that screen loaded. So you would have to close that print dialog, go back to the order entry screen, go to the next order, then hit print for it to turn around and print that next order. You can't leave the print dialog open and expect it to stay in sync with the parent.
Tracy, I've unmuted you if you need to ask a follow-on question.
It works great. Is there a way, because it gets stuck behind other screens that are up, is there a way to automatically close that screen? Could I do that like through a BPM or a directive or something?
What version are you on?
10.2.300.
No.
Oh, come on.
In 2021, they added BPMs on report printing and stuff like that, so you could hang up a BPM or something like that, but that's not until Kinetic. You could do it via customization, but you would have to customize every print screen, or if you wanted to this to be ubiquitous. So
yeah, that's
correct.
okay.
Just to trap the print icon.
Right. So you could do a customization. If this is the particular one screen that's causing issues, you could do a customization, pretty simple one. There's a two-click event, after two-click event, that you can hook onto in the customization and just say after two-click event and just do this dot close, and it should just close the window when you click print. But you know, that comes with the caveat of it'll do it every single time, so it might get you upset if you click the button and you didn't mean to exit. Then you're kind of gonna find yourself in the other side of the wall now.
Yeah. Well, we have the upgrade on our list. Did you say it was Kinetic 21.1?
Yes.
But okay.
Yeah, 2021 anything, they have added BPMs to report printing and process business objects that didn't exist before. So that might be an option.
Okay, I'll accept that.
I'm a bit confused as if you hit the print button in order entry, it opens up as a modal window. So you must close it in order to navigate, like you're stuck with it. I'm not sure how you can keep the window open and navigate.
It does let us keep going with the print button open.
Not all of them are modal. There are some screens that aren't.
Yeah, some of them are not modal, but order entry is modal though. I just tested it on my version.
Yeah.
So I'm a little confused about that too. Is it sales order acknowledgement specifically?
Yes.
And is it through sales order tracker or sales order entry that you have this issue?
I didn't ask.
Okay. I wonder if Jose, can you test the sales order tracker?
So the pro forma invoice is not modal. I'm wondering if that's what's causing the issue. So I just tested it on order entry. So if you go to order entry and you open the sales order acknowledgement, that's modal. But if you go to actions and then you click pro forma, that one is not modal. So I'm wondering if it's that
Okay.
one, or it might be tracker. But either way, the problem is the same. If it's not modal, you can't. Yeah.
Tracy, I think that there's a mass print option for that, so you can mark all your sales orders and then go print them. You have to figure out that process if you got multiple people doing things, but.
Okay, I can look into that too. Although I mean, the upgrade, I don't think for us is terribly far off. So I think they can wait.
Okay. And Jennifer Lisser
Thank you.
confirmed that works the same for the job traveler as well.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, in order tracker it is also modal, so I'm guessing is the pro forma window.
Okay, next one up on the plate is Patty Tesh sent in a chat this morning, so I went ahead and added, can you show where to set the menu to default all to classic? We're finding that some forms open in classic, others in Kinetic, which is confusing their user base. They initially want to have everything set to classic, and is Blake still on the call? Because I know he was the one that did that over at AY.
Blake was unable to attend this. He had a meeting to get to.
Does anybody have that
well,
option?
I can guide you.
My experience, this is Brad, my experience is that there's a Kinetic maintenance, I think it's called. I'll go back and look it up. And then, Kinetic application maintenance, I think it is, something like that. And
Yeah, that's
so,
correct.
yeah, and so you should be able to turn everything off in there. I think what Blake also mentioned was you can go menu item by menu item. And so there's a couple ways there's like 3 or 4 ways to turn things off, unfortunately.
I found an effective way is to set it on the user's preferences. There's a table called sysuser file, and you can update default form type base, and that will prevent it from opening across the board. I just made an updatable BAQ for my company to do that from my chair without having to do it for all the users.
But if you go to Kinetic application maintenance, it depends what version you're on. There is a bug you can toggle to set it off for all companies. I think in 300 there was a bug you had to actually go to each company individually and turn it off. I don't know if they fixed that, but it should be as simple as going in there and just toggling it all off once, and then you're all set. Yeah.
So inside the Kinetic application maintenance, you just went through the different companies and then said,
yes. Yep. Because
click on
click on the menu all companies on top. Because there used to be one here, and that one didn't work. Maybe that's why they took it away. So I just went through each one individually and.
Which one did they turn on and off?
Yeah.
So there you go, Patty. If you have any questions, the Kinetic application maintenance seems to be fairly easy to turn it off and on by company. And I'm sure that's going to come in handy for Blake, and he's not here to enjoy that. When they try to bring on their new company next year, they could just turn it on right here for all the users rather than going through menu by menu.
Patty, you're unmuted if you needed to ask a follow-on question or if that's all good.
Now, one thing to note on that, if you are still in the menu, there's a folder called Kinetic Trackers. I think if you use those, you will still launch Kinetic. So if you don't want those, you just make sure that folder is not accessible.
Any other questions there, Patty?
Calvin Endres has a couple other follow-ons if you want to. I think the same as what Hasso was saying. There's a couple Kinetic-only tractors and executive analysis. At one point, he also ran into a specific menu that was stuck, and he had to set it on the menu item itself. So drilling down and setting that specific menu item. So it seems to manage most of them, but if you run into something specific, you may need to go down to the menu item and choose Classic instead of Kinetic there.
So doing it through the menu maintenance is the other way to do it?
Yes.
And another way is to actually use DMT, and you can export all the menus, use DMT to update that field.
Which would go very quickly.
So again, there's 10 ways to do anything in Epicor. We've got a few here that may make it easier for you to turn that on and off, Patty. So hopefully that'll help you out there.
Just an additional note about this, though, is that any new features that come out that use new fields, those are only going to be available in the new Kinetic screen. They're not going to be on the classic.
Yep, I brought that up earlier for people. If Epicor adds a new field to the system, you're only going to see it on the Kinetic screen, not on the classic screens in 2021 and forward.
I thought they were not gonna do that until I thought that was not until the sunset of Classic in 2 years. Is that incorrect?
No, that's already now. The new fields are not showing up on the classic screens. So if you go to maintenance for the
It was my understanding
screen,
that Classic was gonna be maintained through for the next 2 years, and then they would sunset it.
No, this is already.
Classic screen, we're not getting rid of the classic screens, but we're also not adding new to it.
So new functionality is Kinetic specific.
Right.
Yeah, like the customer inactive option came available in the fall update for us in Kinetic 2021.2, and so, but that's also only available in the Kinetic screen.
Yeah, and I want to say it was company maintenance or company configuration. There are a couple new checkboxes and settings that only appear on the Kinetic screen, not on the Classic. So heads up for disabling the Kinetic for everybody. I would say keep it for your admin or your ERP administrator so they can still see what's the new functionality, what came out, do we need to utilize this in the company? Not necessarily something you want to shut off 100%. After Patty, we had a message in from Chance Finley. It was a comment on querying for cloud. He was believing there was going to be a read-only access to the database that was mentioned at Insights and that this was in the pipeline, but I'm not sure because I haven't heard that that's part of 2021.2. Tim, can you verify that?
I don't quite understand the question.
For cloud users, there was going to be a read access to the database mentioned at Insights for being able to query your data.
Of replicating your Epicor database to a SQL instance that you'd be able to write SQL queries to, I think is what he's talking about.
You're unmuted, Amy.
Oh, thank you. Hi.
Sorry.
I was actually trying to comment on the previous question, not to the answering this one, but I can find out. I believe that this is available, but I'm going to double check right now, and I will let you know as soon as I find out, hopefully in the next few minutes.
For the classic and Kinetic discussion?
No, the current question, querying for the cloud, yeah.
Okay.
The read-only database.
Yeah, we're on the cloud, and I believe I saw this as an option, but I think you have to ask for it. I don't think it's just available.
Yeah, I think he's right about that.
Okay. After that, we had Mark Olbrantz chime in. He had heard both configurators were going to be staying. So the KB Max and the product configurator will be there moving forward. Product configurator is still the backbone to the inspection plans as well, not just for product configuration. So I think both of those will continue moving forward.
That is correct.
And Mark was thinking that the product configurator that's currently out there, not the KB Max, is going to be kind of basic, not see much more enhancements other than what they need possibly for the inspection plans.
So yes, that is correct. The Epicor configurator, as it's called, and that's what we're calling it internally. We're not calling it the old configurator or something like that, or the embedded. It's just the Epicor configurator is going to continue as a product, at least for right now, because of the reasons stated. It is basic, it's got the features it has, but we're not going to be enhancing it. Although we did just add some enhancements to make it so it can be run with the new user interface.
It'll be kineticized?
Yes, it is. It is now. So you can build your screens with the new UI, and now it can run from a web browser instead of having to do the export to EWA and all that garbage that was time consuming and made not some nice screens sometimes. So now it is Kinetic friendly, the new UI friendly, and it will continue to work. The CPQ offering is our going forward product. So that's what we're going to be selling to all new customers as we go forward. because it is a much better solution and it's much prettier and it's web friendly and speedier and all the nice things that you've probably heard and seen about it. So
Mark had a few comments, so I broke them into multiples. If you can go ahead and unmute Mark, Fred, I'll go on to the next one. Has anyone run the shrink config field properties? Asking what is it supposed to do? What did it do? They tried it, shrank the PC table in test, and it filled their transaction log. Has anybody tried doing this or running this process in Epicor? Mark, I'm waving the flag, trying to get you some answers here.
The filling of the transaction logs, are you talking about the SQL transaction logs?
I guess in general, what we have found consistently over the last 4 years of being on, 5 years, whatever it is, being on E10 is that our configurator table, PC value table, whatever it is they call it now, that thing runs about 75% of our entire database. So it makes our database a bit unwieldy at times. And again, we saw this when we were on that, on this system for 1 year. Everybody said, "Oh, just purge." I said, "I can't even purge anything until I'm 18 months in. I'd like to keep some of that data." We have not run the database purge yet. Somewhere in the last version, we're on 10.2.700, somewhere in one of the last 600, 700 versions, they came up with this shrink option, the shrink configurator to field properties. And it supposedly clears out some of the dead space out of there. It appears to work because we filled transaction logs and things like that. We kind of crashed on us, but I guess that's where I was looking for ideas and thoughts of what anybody else has experienced on this.
So I believe what that is supposed to do, if you look inside of the configurator inputs that are saved, not only does it save the value of your input, as in the color that you chose was red, but it also saves the location of the field on the screen. So all the field properties, the X and Y position, the field length, all the things that really have nothing to do with the answers to the configuration. And that's because you have that option. You can move things around in the configurator to have different positions on the screen. Then next time you run it, it remembers what those locations were on the screen and repopulates it to that position. That's doing some advanced work, but that's what it does. And your configurator can also have, you can change the description of the input, and that's saved in the configurator input table. I believe, and I have personally have never run this process myself, but I believe that's what it's supposed to do, is gets rid of all of the extra clutter that's out there so that we can shrink that file down to just the answers.
Yeah, and it does appear to work. But again, the test kind of got botched when we filled the transaction logs, the process stopped. And I can't remember, there was a ratio, and I just don't have the data at my fingertips when I thought of this question last night of how much space we took out of that table versus the transaction logs. It was a 2-to-1 ratio in one direction. I mean, it did make a difference. So, I mean, we're going to try and find a time to do this process again and test, see how it goes, make sure everything turns out the way we want. But I guess we're the only, I guess Swiss Tech is on the bleeding edge again. I don't know how we end up there all the time, but we seem to. So
another thing that I have found in product configurators is I did a mistake once, and I found out really quick, is that I created this really nice big fat field that I used for storing tables in my configurator, and it was an input field. It was one of the edit fields, and I stored a whole bunch of data. And when I say a whole bunch, I had thousands of records of values that I loaded up when I loaded the configurator, so I could use that table to do really quick work. When you save the configurator, it saves that table. And I had to make sure that on save that I basically wipe out my field that's filled with all that data, because I don't need to save that table every time. In fact, I want to go rebuild it every time I load the configurator. So you might look at your configurators and see if there's any data that you don't need to save anymore with the configurator, and make sure you clean them out on the on save of your configurator, because it's going to save it and it's going to duplicate that data every single time.
Okay. Yeah, I appreciate everybody's thoughts.
On top of that, with that cutoff date, I would almost recommend that you start small and grow that cutoff date, because then it'll probably do less SQL transactions in that event. That way, you're not taking up too much space on your transaction logs, and then as you're doing your backups and your backups are purging those over time, then you'll probably be able to stay on top of it.
Yeah, I think what we found, we did the shrink, and I don't know if the shrink gave the option gave a date option. It just started running, and I got to dig back into it and try it again. But I don't think it gave an option. Clearly, the purge clearly gives a cutoff option. And yeah, I was going to start with a week or a month and work, and then try and do it quarterly as we get caught up on that. So,
the shrink, you might just have to take that hard hit at the beginning probably, and then if you actually schedule that to run, it should, hopefully, I mean, I would hope, I don't know what the back end code there looks like, but I would hope it would be, less and less transactions as you stay on top of it.
Yeah. Oh no, absolutely. It's getting over the hump. So, all right.
The online documentation for that, if you only select the configuration inputs, I think it's hard coded to be 18 months.
Okay.
Like, take a look at the help on it, because if that's the only option that you choose, then it decides how far back, or I think it's actually going to go quite a ways back and purge.
Gotcha. That's a good thing to know. So I appreciate it.
The other thing, because we're configurator user quite a bit with QA and product configurator, is the source in the right under IIS. It generates source every time someone runs the configurator, and maybe it's something we do. It creates a new source file, and it just keeps creating a new one and a new one and a new one. And so it's like gigs of data. And I've written a PowerShell. I'm just testing it now to purge all that. But it's, for us at least, it's huge. Every time someone does an inspection, we're generating huge files. So,
yeah, it's quite the interesting side of it all. So, thank you.
Okay.
Maybe I'll have something to report back in next year.
Yeah, good luck.
Sounds good. We'll hold you to that for February, Mark.
All right.
Awesome. The next one that you brought up was a quick ship question. You went from 4.0 to 5.5 in October. Do you want to go ahead and kind of discuss this? I don't really need to read it since we have you already unmuted on the phone.
Yeah, we went to the newer version just because of some server upgrades and other upgrades we did. It would just literally the service, they'd be printing out there doing labels. We might do 40 packages in a day, and all of a sudden they'd come in my office and say it's not printing. Then one of the times I didn't even get to do anything, and like 10 minutes later, all the labels had run and reports started spitting out. And we traced it to this service, did a service restart a couple times, and then I went in and looked at the options on the recovery, and they were set. Those were all set to do nothing. Those first failures, it was all three of those were do nothing. And I just sent them to restart the service, and it has solved our problem for the last 3 weeks or 4 weeks since that I made that change. So that was one I guess I just wanted to share if somebody's having that issue. And then the other was we use Speedy as a service. We have UPS and FedEx, and on Speedy they print an AOD on the label. It's something, I don't know, adult authorized signature. Some signatures required. Speedy charges $4 for it every time. Well, we were just letting it fly because we didn't care. Then we found out we were getting charged, and there is no option in the Packer screen to turn that off like there are other manifest options. You can select COD or different things. There's no option in there to turn it off for Speedy. We had to go in separately to do it. So again, I was looking to see if anyone else had that particular issue. So we're a pretty simple install. Sorry.
Anybody else work with Speedy over there? Kind of watching the chat window, since yes, we do have everyone muted, but I'll keep an eye on the question or the chat window if anybody's using that. If you're having the same problem, if you can go ahead and let us know, how are you working with that? How did you bypass or build a workaround for it?
Hey, Mark, have you checked it? It may not be anything, but the label itself, the report that's in the report folder, if you open that up in Crystal, there isn't by any chance something hard-coded on the label, is it?
You know what? That is a good possibility I never thought of, but who has an install of Crystal left anywhere to open this, by the way?
Right. I was actually looking for a Crystal version once I saw your question, and I'm still
Does anybody have a Crystal version? I'll email you the report. You can tell me if you see that.
I have the report. I just need to find a Crystal. Somebody
right, exactly. Who's got Crystal installed?
I still have it installed.
All right. I may take you up on that because we opened a case with support, and it's been kind of quiet on that front for the last week. So kind of nothing on that one. So all right.
It's just a wild guess.
That's a good idea because maybe they didn't suppress it properly in the report, and we could just fix it ourselves very quickly. So that would be worthwhile. So I appreciate that idea. Thank you.
So Jennifer Lisser offered, Mark, you can go buy Crystal from your CAM.
All right, nice. I think somewhere along the way I kept an old server with it still running somewhere, shut down in some VM somewhere. So I may have to fire that thing back up. One other quick comment going back to the Kinetic discussion about turning it off. We went live with 10.2.700 back in March or something, and we did it over the weekend. We were seeing print windows for Kinetic, and I hadn't properly trained our users. There is a way to turn it off for the entire system, and I've been trying to re-find it, and I can't put my finger on it. But I managed. That was something that they covered last in some of Amy Melton and a couple of people from her group mentioned that last year. So there is a way to do it, to turn it off. You don't have to do it screen at a time. And I mean, I understand there's some limitations with not being able to do research on it and stuff, but if you find yourself in a predicament where you do that upgrade because it was just the print by default, a lot of the print windows were coming up that, and again, we would have people freaking out on that. So until we got them trained, I wanted it turned off, and there is a way, and I keep trying to find it and just can't seem to get my arms around it at the moment.
Yeah, this is Amy. I think the way that I know of is through Kinetic application maintenance, which somebody already showed on their screen. So if there is another way, maybe kind of a behind the scenes way, I'm not sure I remember what that might be, but yeah, this is the screen that will turn it off. And just so everybody's aware, by default, starting with 2021.1, by default, processes, reports, and trackers are enabled in the new Kinetic UX by default. So those are the only forms that will default to Kinetic enabled, the UX enabled. So yeah, you're right. The reports are the ones that you'll see, but also processes and trackers. But then you can turn them off.
I wouldn't have used your name if I knew you were on. I'm sorry.
No problem.
And now I found it in mine because I'm in 10.2.700, so it was a nice way to at least get it going. We can turn it on and test, get the print screen to do the training when we're ready to flip people on in live. So that is where we did it as well. I just I don't know. I had a brain lock up apparently. So thank you for the clarification.
No problem.
And my other comment that I will make here, and I may have made this before at another meeting, but I'll say it again, is that if you are going to run Kinetic, the best way to do it is from a web browser. And it is much more user-friendly, much faster, and that's the only way I run it now, is I go into a web browser and I launch Epicor from a web browser. And as long as you don't need in those applications that are not converted yet, like BAQs, you can't edit BAQs yet, but as long as you're running sales order entry, purchase order entry, job, it's a much more friendly environment.
Yeah, there is this was added, and I'm trying to remember, I don't know if you remember, Tim, but we did add a direct link from the client to launch Kinetic in the browser. And I don't remember if that was just here in 2021.2 that came, but
A little earlier than that, but
Was it? Yeah, I couldn't.
yeah,
I
but
can't
it's
remember
there.
when that came. So if you, I think somebody was showing the Kinetic homepage before. It is. I think it's in the. Is it in the user settings? I can't remember now. I have to look at
I
it.
thought it was down in help or something.
I'll double check right now.
You can click the little profile
well,
icon
this-
on the bottom left
Well,
and click.
this isn't the Kinetic homepage though. This is the modern shell
Yep.
that you're showing here. Let me see where
That's
it
the one we
is.
all know and recognize.
Yeah.
But all you have to have is the URL that's sitting on your home page, and enter that in a web browser /home, and it'll take you there. So.
Yeah, this is Brad. I've got the Kinetic up, and yeah, there's a little people icon at the bottom left, and I've never seen that before, so I'm glad you pointed that out. Open Kinetic in browser.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then you log in via a browser. The browser is much quicker to run the Kinetic screens.
Yeah, as long as you don't need any of the classics yet. Right, that's the
right.
caveat right now. Yes. Yeah.
Yes. If you need a classic,
we're still a mix. Right.
If you still haven't converted your classic screen, then it's then you have to go back. So, but once you have everything, or if you have a user that doesn't need any of your classic screens, then that's a better way to go.
And if you are converting, I would recommend doing it in the browser because App Studio allows you to use dev tools from the browser to kind of trace what's actually happening. It's your best debugging tool for App Studio right now.
Well, there you go. Another reason.
Which, by the way, in DevTools, I mean, Kinetic uses the Epicor API that comes on every version since 10.1.600, I think. But it shows you exactly what the screen is doing and what methods it's calling, pretty much like in the REST API, so that you can replicate that if you're trying to, automate or create a third-party application.
And by the way, getting back to speedy freight or shipping, that looks to me like a very local around Sioux City, Sioux Falls area, and that's why nobody knew about it.
Speedy is absolutely a regional carrier, headquartered in Minneapolis, and they kind of do Wisconsin, Illinois, Minnesota, Iowa, a little bit into Missouri. So clearly, I knew we were in the minority on that one right out of the gate. That's why I didn't really expect, but I thought I'd give it a shot and maybe share a tip with somebody that might help them on that printing failure.
Yep.
So.
Also, just on the side note there, Tracy is offering, if you want to send her your report file over at Bruno Tracy Winkleman, she'll open it and take a look at your report label.
All right, I will do that.
She's got Crystal over there.
They've always been further behind than Swiss Tech Coatings.
Also, Ben Dicos over at Stellar turned around and mentioned they use Speedy, but they're not sure if they have that issue.
The AOD, okay.
So, you may have another person behind your crusade there, Mark.
All right, sounds good.
Awesome. On a side note, Steve Fossey did throw in, he had a ticket open because it didn't work. They said it wasn't available yet regarding the Kinetic Open, I believe. The browser doesn't seem to work with any kind of Windows authorization. Is that correct, Steve? Are you unmuted?
You cut out just for a second. What did you say the issue was, Kelvin?
I'm unmuting Steve Fossey. If you want to go ahead and mention, I wasn't sure what your two comments here were, so.
Yeah, sorry, thank you. I was just referring to the Kinetic open in browser link down in the profile. That didn't seem to work. I actually opened a ticket and they got back to me and said that it was actually erroneously included in the documentation and wasn't available yet. And the other question was simply about using the browser, using Kinetic in the browser on all of my dev environments that I've tried so far. I can't seem to find a way to make that work with any kind of Windows authentication, which is the only kind of authentication we use in our organization. So just wanted to throw that out there.
We use it with Azure AD and it works fine. Are you using it with just regular SSO or are you using it with Azure?
Neither. We're using it with LDAP.
Ah.
All of our app servers are using LDAP.
If the answer is that LDAP is deprecated, that's also fine. I get that.
Yeah, I
I'd
thought
like to
LDAP
hear-
only worked with IE. I'm pretty sure that it only really works natively with the Internet Explorer, which Kinetic will not.
We do not use Internet Explorer. Don't worry. No, we're using all of our deployments are using remote apps actually, using net TCP and deploying over remote apps. So
Steve, if you'd like to send over the ticket number.
Yeah, sure. I'll look that up.
I can probably get that over to Amy and let her know. Amy, you're still the head of the Kinetic world, aren't you?
I would be happy to take a look at it.
Awesome. Before I go jumping in.
Yeah, before you start assigning me more action items.
Well, no, don't get me wrong. We're not married to LDAP. We're quite happy to move on. It's just so far there's nothing in the docs that I've been able to see that says thou shalt move on to Azure AD.
Awesome.
But yes, I will get that.
Learning something new every day. The next one we have here is from Tim Coopers. Product configurator in 10.2.300. Does that mean they won't have functional configurator? I think Tim just went ahead and answered that for us.
That's correct.
Yes, it is working. So Tim, you do not need, or Tim Coopers, I got to, which Tim are you talking to? Tim K, you don't have to necessarily hold off. Kinetic and configurator should work totally fine.
Now, if they have not converted their configurator up to the new UI, they will not be able to run it from the web. From a web browser. You'll have to log in through a classic screen. That's one of the gotchas there, is that you can say, oh, I can run sales order entry from a web browser, but if it tries to call a traditional configurator, one that has not been converted, it won't run it. So you'll have to go in and upgrade your configurator to the new UI, and then you'd be able to do that.
Awesome. So we kind of answered that one here while we're doing our meeting today. Bruce Kyle had sent out, anyone use connections to run Crystal with the cloud? And Bruce, I'm going to try and find you here in the attendees, unless Fred's already found you. I'm not that fast here. Got you unmuted, Bruce? Well, at least I thought I did. Okay,
Hello?
there you are. Got it, there you are.
Yeah, I was just wondering if anyone else was trying to use Azure connections for Crystal reports on a cloud application.
Now, are you running this inside the Epicor cloud?
Yes.
Or in your own Azure cloud?
No, this is in the Epicor cloud, and I still want to run. I have a lot of Crystal reports I wrote, and I still want to run them. It is set up. I haven't really tested it out a lot. It took quite a bit to get it going, so I was just wondering if anyone else has done this.
Are there any other Epicor cloud users that are running Crystal reports? I'd be interested to find out how you connected Crystal to the database for accessing the data.
My CAM sold me on this Azure data connection where, the Azure data connection sits on my server, and use that to create a data link to run Crystal reports. The Crystal reports were all written as direct connection, not created in an XML file. So they would have,
they're going straight to the
database connect reports.
It could be that replicated database that they're talking about earlier, kind of like a read-only access, just hooking up Crystal to SQL as a data source, probably.
Yep.
I'm not aware of anyone, but you can actually attach Crystal directly to SQL, just like you can with any OWC driver. So I'm sure it's possible. But running, I don't know if you could get Epicor to talk to Crystal to run that, other than having it as like a take you to like a URL to somehow launch it.
Dylan, you're breaking up. Are you driving?
Yes.
Got it. Okay. I'm like, someone's getting background noise.
Okay, well, sounds like no one else is crazy as me to try this.
If somebody does come up, we'll go ahead and get you connected. Bruce,
Okay.
Bruce and Amy, I just put in the chat window over to you the case number that was open for this issue.
Got it. Thank you.
Awesome. Next one that we got was from Steve Fossey. BMW is awesome. They have 8 licenses, saved a bunch of time. How is it affected by the Kinetic 2021 upgrade?
It is, and it works fine. We've been doing testing with it. No difference there. It uses REST, so there's really no effects. It works the same.
Awesome. Steve, I went ahead and unmuted if you have any other questions.
No, that's great to know. Is there any gotchas for piloting or UAT?
Nope. Worked like a dream for us. Just change the URL and move on with your life, sort of thing.
Wow. That's the best news I've had today.
Well, see, our work is done now, Jose. You made one person happy. We're done.
Woohoo!
Oh,
Okay,
Jose's made
next
me
one.
happy a few times.
What was that?
Don't talk about that, buddy.
Sorry, no. I just said Jose's made me happy a lot of times, but he said not to talk about it, so I won't.
Next one was Jay Norton, or our last question was from Jay Norton. They often get orders for custom order items that are months in advance of the due date. Epicor creates a job at the time of the order, even though no material or work or anything is actually done, but the variance is posted at the end of the job using the job, I'm going to say the original date. And with costs kind of going all over the board right now, it's adding confusion. Is there a way to reset the job so that the variance is calculated from a new date?
So first of all, what's the costing method?
Jay, you should be able to unmute yourself.
We're using standard cost.
So yeah, the standard cost is probably set based off of the standard that was in place when you created the job, when you firmed the job.
Correct.
Do you firm up the job, or do you have MRP leave it as an unfirmed job?
I think when the part is added to the job, isn't it? Because that's when it's going to go pull it from the part cost and create the job header, job assembly records that are going to hold that cost. And then anything captured as the job rolls forward.
So here's the deal: is that standard cost, that the standard cost of the product that's going to go into, or that's going to be finished, is going to be based off of the cost of that part at the time it's completed versus the cost that was put into the part while you made it. The costs that are charged into the job are based off of the date that transaction happened. So if you have a job that was created today and you issue a part to it today, the cost of the part that was issued today is the cost that goes in. If you recost that part later, it doesn't matter. The actual cost of what was issued is what matters. So the date is the value of the job is always going to be based off of when you complete the job. That's what the standard cost will be. It'll be received as, or cost of goods sold. But the actual cost should always be based off of
what was captured on the job while it ran.
While it ran. So if it, if the cost of the materials went up during that time, it doesn't matter, because it's the cost of the material is going to be as of the day the material was issued to the job.
Yeah, I think when you run the job get details and it builds that job assembly, it creates that TLA cost record.
Yeah, but that's not the
level actual, and that's at the time you added the job the part to the job and ran the get details. Then as the actuals are captured, they're rolled into that job assembly and then compared at the time the job closes. But it's not going to go out if you change the standard of the part 3 months later.
Yeah, it's not going
It's
to
not going to take the new standard. It's going to take whatever was in play when the job was created.
I think you need to do some more tests, because I believe that that some of those things are estimate. There's an estimated and stuff, but the actual cost that's going to be charged to the job is always based off of the date that the material was issued or the date the labor was transacted. That's the cost that's going to be actually charged to the job.
Yep, the TLA and the TLE, the estimate is what's grabbed when you create it. The TLE is the actual that gets updated as the labor gets recorded and the materials get issued.
TLA should be based off of the date you transacted it.
But I would see the variance only changing, because it would have to be the manufacturing cost going against the actual cost. That's what's going to go off to variance.
Yep.
In a standard cost world. So unless the cost changed between when the job was created and when the job shipped, then you might recognize different variances against the standard cost, because the actuals are still going to be the actuals. So I'm going to kind of agree with you there, Tim, that we need to take a look at what's really going on.
Yeah, because I mean, there are some situations where you can have a weird variance where if you finish the part and you receive it to stock and then do a cost change, there's some weird timing things that happen if you do a cost change before you actually close it, but after it's been received. I've seen that kind of thing happen, but and it depends on how often you're changing your costs too, that it starts getting confusing.
Well, yes. So let me say a couple of things. Thing number one is a confession that the manufacturing folks just asked me this about a week ago when we were reviewing our financial statements, and I have not had a chance to dig into a particular detail.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing. And number two, absolutely, we have been changing our standard costs frequently, as you can imagine, trying to keep our costs accurate in our system, and with all these material costs going bonkers, we want to know what's going on. So
when you say frequently, how often do you change your costs and roll them up?
I review PPVs once a month. So that's how often we're changing costs on the items that we received. So
because metal is bouncing around, you're probably rolling your standard costs and updating them to try and keep the moving target a little closer. But the time that job got created, it grabbed the costs that were on that part when the job got created. If this job's going to run multiple months, the dirty trick you could do, go in and change the part on the job, run the get details, run it back, run the get details, and it'll update your job costs. Epicor will allow you to change the job or the part while the job's running. That would update your job assembly cost records. Not necessarily going to say that's a smart thing to do, because if they modified the engineering on that job for a one-off, that's not going to be in the new get details.
So here's the other thing I've seen people do, and maybe this is a different scenario than when you're in, but they create a job and they receive a part into stock and they forget to put a cost on it, and then they issue that part to the job. So now the job has zero cost. They go, oh well, that's not right, and so they do a cost adjustment against the material that doesn't fix the job. And so now somebody looks at it later and says, hey, this job says that the material's free, but the materials has $5 a pound on it.
Yeah.
What's that about? And you go, well, because at the time you issued it, it said zero.
Right.
And so if somebody's going and looking at what the estimate is, and looking at all these things, it's going to be different based off of what actually happened at the time. It's a time-stamped transaction.
No, I know. I guess manufacturing's problem, I think, that they're having is that we receive the order and the job gets I don't know, what is it called? Released or whatever. But the customer knows they don't want it for 9 months. And so we don't do anything with that job until maybe 60 days before it's going to happen. Then we start issuing materials. Now, I don't know all the get details and firming it versus whatever. So maybe that's what we need to do is we need to, I don't know if they're getting the details way back when it initially opens.
So here's the thing. When they run MRP, as soon as you create a sales order, MRP creates a job. It's an unfirmed job. They can, if every day they don't firm it until you need to firm it. So my rule is don't firm a job until the last minute, because
it's
every day MRP runs, it recreates that job again with the new costs and with the current bill of material. As soon as you firm it, you've said, this is what we're going to do. We're not ever going to change it. So I say firm last minute, firm just before you need to. And then that allows the system to keep things clean. And don't, if they're not needing to start it until 60 days before, don't firm it until 60 days before or 61 days before. Give a couple days to print out travelers and do whatever they need to do. But MRP is going to order materials for those unfirm. Now, there is one exception to what I just said, and let me put the disclaimer. If there's any purchase direct items on that job where it's something you have to buy and you have to order it 4 months at a time, the only way you can do that purchase direct item is if it's a firm job. So there is an exception to this magical rule, but that's an odd exception.
Okay. Well, I'm not sure, because I mean we do have some stuff that's like extruded aluminum where they want long lead times, so maybe we need to firm the job to get the raw in.
No, you don't have to firm the job to do it unless it's purchased direct for that job. If you're just buying stuff and it has a 6-month lead time, fine. MRP will tell you to buy it ahead of time without firming it.
Yeah, without firming, the demand will still show up and get sent over to purchasing.
Yep. Now, some companies don't like to do that. Some companies go, oh, well, I don't want purchasing to buy anything unless it's a firm demand. Well, now you're kind of breaking down what the whole concept of what MRP was designed to do.
Right.
MRP says, hey, if you have a sales order and it has a date, then that MRP will create a job. And they go, well, what if the sales order is wrong? Well, then stop telling, sales shouldn't be entering wrong sales orders, first of all, but that's.
So MRP will still tell you to buy the material even when it's unfirmed.
Yes, of course. Yes. As long as you have good lead times on your parts, but.
So imagine that they put it in, and they leave it unfirmed. MRP is going to tell you to go buy that stuff.
Yep.
But you're saying just let MRP keep doing it. So we get the raw material in and then finally 2 or 3, a couple months later. So MRP is going to tell you to buy it even if it's not needed for several months?
No, it's going to tell you when you need it. So the job is scheduled.
To make a PO with a release on the PO for the date out in the future.
Right. Okay. It's going to date it properly.
Yes.
So
as long as your lead time is correct.
Yeah, no, I understand. Lead time's got to be correct. So they just need to wait to firm up the job.
Right.
Correct. Because the second they firm that MRP job, they're telling the system, I'm manually going to schedule it. I'm manually going to maintain it from this point forward.
So the bad news about firming it is, let's say you firm it today. You firm it for 6 months out, but then tomorrow the customer calls in and says, you know what, I don't really need it 6 months out. I need it 7 months out. At that point, it doesn't matter. You've firmed it already. The job is firmed for 6 months out. If you let MRP do the work, MRP tomorrow will go, oh, they reschedule it. MRP will automatically reschedule the unfirmed job and push it out. Right. And if the customer pulls it in, MRP will automatically reschedule the job and pull it in. And so it allows MRP to flex with the customer when it's way out there.
So otherwise, the second you firm it, you're going to manage it from that point forward.
It's your job now.
So the firm date is is the first marker in the sand from which the variance is going to be calculated.
Oh, I'm still questioning whether there's really a variance problem, but that's a secondary discussion.
The cost is going to be captured and set for the estimated on the job at the time you firm it and say, this is the job, now we're going to go forward. If MRP has to reschedule it, it's going to delete it and recreate a new job and grab whatever the costs are at the date it creates the new job.
Okay.
So if you rolled your costs on the first and MRP said, hey, we don't need this job, deleted it, or we need it a month later, it's going to go create a new job, pull it in and pull whatever costs are at the time it created that job. It's not reworking the old job, it's actually deleting it and recreating a whole brand new one, as long as it wasn't firmed up. But if you firm it, it's going to lock those costs, because that's when you said, I'm going to manage it from this point forward, it's a real job.
Sounds like we also have to just try some things.
Yep.
The other thing you could do is probably write a BAQ to look at jobs that are currently running where the estimated cost doesn't match what's on the part cost record, because those are going to be your anomalies that aren't going to make sense with the variance. Because it's going to show, you're going to look at part cost, you're going to look at actual job, and you're going to say, oh, the variance would be 25 cents, but why did this job post 50 cents? At the time that job was created, the standard cost was different. So comparing that to the actual is a different amount of variance. And that could be what you're seeing is causing this confusion as well.
Yeah. The estimated cost is calculated at the time you created the job, but that's not going to be the variant. That's not what the variance is going to be based off of. It's going to be based off of the actual cost put in versus the standard cost at the time you complete the job. Because transactions are always done based off of the date you did the transaction and the cost on that date.
Okay, well, that would seem to tell me that it doesn't matter until you issue the material or the labor.
Yep, that's right.
Yep.
And that's what they're telling me they don't see. They're telling me they see variances based on when the job was first created.
I don't think so. I would.
Shouldn't be. If you run the production detail report, you should see that on there.
Yeah.
Which report?
Production detail.
Production detail report. Okay.
Should give you the exact dollars, what was the estimated, what was the actual, and hey, here's what the variance is going to be. That should match when you run the job closing, what's going to post off to the variance buckets. Now, I'm also going to recommend make sure that you have your variance broken out by labor, material, burden, subcontract, so that you can see which ones are running awry, so that you know where to go hunt for the ghost, rather than, oh, it's just manufacturing variance. Well, is it subcontract labor that's out of whack? Is it materials that are out of whack? Is it material burden? By having that set up in
job tracker.
I'm sorry?
Is the production detail report found off of the job tracker screen?
Go to the actions menu, go to the print, and there should be in tracker, I think if you hit print, you have the option for traveler or production detail.
Yeah, but I start at the job tracker screen.
You can. It's in the job tracker screen or in the job close screen. You can see the production detail report, or it's right on the menu. It's called production detail report. You put in the job number and print it.
Yeah, it's on the production management job reports menu.
It's not a pretty report. It's quite detailed. Depending on which checkboxes you check, you can see lots and lots of detail. So.
Yeah, I actually have an example of one up on my screen. Yeah, I see what you're talking about.
It's tons of detail, and it takes some study to find out what happened. So.
Okay. All right. Thanks, guys.
You're welcome.
Awesome. What do we have here in the hopper? Mike Mullaney turned around, put a note in here about people running average costs. You'll see the changes as they're actually happening, and it'll update what the average. So then you're not going to see a variance. because average cost is just going to post what's the average going in here.
Correct. An average cost is, I was going to say something about average cost, and hi, Mike, long time no speak. I was going to say something about average cost. That's kind of my fallback. If somebody can't figure out standard cost, it's like, well, why don't you just move to average cost? It will take care of your costs for you, and you don't have to worry about it, and you won't have variances anymore, which some people get really freaked out about variances. But if your costs are constantly changing, instead, I had one customer that did a cost roll every day, and I said, well, that you're not standard cost then. The concept of standard cost is to set a cost and then judge everything against that standard. But if you're changing your standard every day, there is no standard. Your average cost. Just go with average cost. Let the system maintain the cost.
Yep, Jennifer Lisser had a couple comments here, but it says she had left. I can't reply back to her. Or doing engineering on the fly might be a workaround also with the costs. But I think, Jay, you guys are repeat manufacturing.
Yes.
I don't know if engineering on the fly, I think you guys have all the engineering behind the part and you just pull in the standard rather than having a one-time job with the engineering behind it.
Yeah, well, we actually do both. We have standard costs kind of for what we would call stock items, and then we have configured items but we use average cost for the configured items.
I'll go ahead and send that update back to her. I just don't know if it's going to get since she logged out.
If you
Lori
put it in the
Welton
sent to all, it'll get included in the minutes, Calvin.
Ah, okay. Didn't know that. Lori Welton commented, if someone changes the prod quantity on the job, it asked if you want to reset the values. You can also answer that. The answer is that can also cause some confusion because when they changed the quantity, it did reset the values that were on the job.
Yep, that would cause confusion. Again, it's not going to change the standard cost. The standard cost and the cost variance will still be based off of what actually happens. So.
And then the final one was Steve Fossey had said, what about FIFO?
What about it?
Yeah, I'm like, I'm sitting here with the same thing. I got a question. What do you mean there, Steve?
But personally, I'm just speaking out of my personal likes and dislikes. I don't like FIFO because it's hard to trace down. It's really like the cost changed. Well, why did it change? I don't know. It's FIFO. First in, first out.
Yeah.
If it's FIFO lot, then hey, then just go with lot cost.
Yeah, because FIFO lot says your lot cost could change, but it's going to track your lot cost at first in, first out cost. It starts getting really messy, complicated.
Oh, I'll agree with that. I guess it just, the question comes up because here we have almost everything FIFO because a lot of our costs fluctuate a lot and they want to know, but it's not lot tracked. And we want to know the material that we're actually using today. What is its cost?
What was its cost when you bought it? Yeah, and that's what FIFO does.
Yeah, exactly. What was its cost when we bought it? And in theory, because we're managing the warehouse reasonably well, the FIFO stacks should pretty much correlate to the material we're actually using.
Yeah, and that is a very great argument for using FIFO. So if you buy 100 today for $1, and then tomorrow you buy one for $100, you've got 101 pieces at $200 worth of stock. But as you consume them, they'll be consumed at $1 a piece until you get to that 101st one, and all of a sudden that one costs $100. And that's what can be weird about it is, why did it cost so much this time? And the answer is
that was the piece that was expensive.
That was the one piece that you had that was expensive. In an average cost environment, if you had received that one piece at $100, it would have averaged that value in, weighted average, and it would have been $100.02, and you wouldn't have noticed it. It would have just floated around.
So in a situation like Jay's, would the job it's still going by at the moment the material is issued by what material is cost is applied to the job.
Correct.
Okay.
It's the cost that gets applied to the job is whatever the current standard is. So even if they bought it yesterday for $1, if they change the standard to $2 today and then issue it, it's going to get issued at $2.
So in the FIFO world, we'll get issued at whatever the material available is.
Yes.
Okay, got it. Sorry, dumb question, but it actually is something that was clear enough in my mind.
And I just noticed there was a final question that came in from Roy Crooks. Roy, are you still on? Shows you inactive, but I'm going to unmute you. And it was a comment back from 252. Sorry, I didn't see this in the list. You can enter it in the Kinetic screen, but it stops an order on the classic order entry screen. You cannot enter these, but logic is there. Roy, I'm not 100% sure. If you want to go ahead and unmute your.
You're talking about configured items?
That I'm not sure. That's why I'm asking him to join in on this.
Because I said something about if you have a configured item that hasn't been redesigned, the configurator hasn't been redesigned, you can't configure it in the new Kinetic screen, the new UI. You can only configure it in the classic.
Maybe that's what it was.
Yeah,
and you can that would have been around when we had the Kinetic discussion going at 250.
So he's right. You can enter the order, but you wouldn't be able to configure it from the new UI. You'd have to go to the old UI to configure it.
And there is a question. Amy Melton wanted to ask a question. Amy, I think you're unmuted.
Yep, I am.
Yay.
Yeah, thank you. And I actually was in this morning for a little bit during the Kinetic upgrade session, so that was really great. I really appreciated all the feedback. I kind of took some detailed notes. One of the things I'm interested in knowing, I don't know if the three gentlemen that were presenting today are still on, but there were some comments about App Studio specifically, and mentions of like the documentation isn't complete, or it seems like there was some gaps there that you were referring to help you ramp up on the new tool set. I'm just wondering if anybody that was, that has that same feeling could comment on that or expand on that a little bit. Anything specific?
I don't see Brad Bose in the list. Is he still there?
No, Brad and Blake and Jim are all gone, I think.
Okay. Well, and you know what? If you guys wouldn't mind, if I could grab their email addresses, if you could forward those to me, if that's okay, I would like to reach out and just get a little bit more detail, because we definitely want to know if there's things that we can do to help our customers get ready for the Kinetic UX configuration. I don't want to confuse this, customization, uplift. We want to make sure that we have all of that in place for you. There is a significant amount of content available in the help and support panel, and that's available from the Kinetic homepage. The one addition and enhancement that's coming in the spring is that we're going to add that help and support panel to the actual App Studio shell as well. And so we think that's going to help, because right there from App Studio, you'll be able to access that content more easily versus having to toggle back to the home page to try to access the help there. So I don't know if it's a matter of just knowing where to look, or that there really is some gaps in the documentation. So if anyone else has any comments, I'd love to hear that. Love to hear your feedback.
I'll get you the emails for the presenters, Amy. If anybody else has comments, now's a great time to ask Amy. She is the head Kinetic person in Epicor, basically.
Could I ask one?
Fire away.
Well, in the on Epic Web, they have the documentation for the old configurator, and actually they're calling it Classic. Is there going to be documentation for the new configurator? And I'm assuming it will happen, but is there a timeline?
Go ahead.
I mean, this is Graham Ross that was asking the question also.
Great, thank you.
So you're talking about CPQ, the KB Max configurator?
No, I'm talking about the new version that you can convert over to App Studio.
Oh,
The Kinetic one.
There should be
there
documentation
should be,
available.
yes.
Yeah. Are you where? And you said on Epic Web. Are you looking in? Have you actually launched the help and support panel and looked there in the application? Or was there a specific document on Epic Web you're referring to?
Yeah, the manuals are there, but they're only, like if you open up it actually under the Kinetic, it's still classic configurator.
Under documentation?
Yeah, under documentation.
I'm just going to go there and look in. I just want to know exactly what the guide is that we're talking about.
Well, there's the big configurator technical reference guide. It probably has not been updated yet.
Yeah, that's one of them. Yeah.
It's a configurator, like a user guide? Is that what it is, Tim?
I think you're right. The technical one.
There's a technical reference guide. It's like 350 pages.
Yeah.
I will say this, that the technical reference guide, it probably does need updated, but all the same stuff that's in there applies except for how the UI will look. So all of the building of your methods and those kinds of things, that all still is the same old stuff. But how you build your screen is what will be different with the new UI, because you use Design Studio functions, an enhanced version of Design Studio. So that part has not been changed in that document, most likely.
Yeah, I'm just actually trying to open up that PDF right now to see what it looks like. So I
think it's 350.
It's taking a little while to open, so you're probably right.
Yeah. So, like the 4 events that you have at the front end of a configurator, are those supported going forward if I switch over to App Studio?
I believe they are. They're supported in a different way, but they're supported.
Okay, so it's just the on-click events and all that that'll have to re-implement in right inside the configurator.
Right.
Yeah.
So the way that things happen are different, but you also have more features. So because in the Kinetic, you can actually do on-click events and things like that. So there's some differences in the way that it will work or can work. And also the whole screen layout is completely different, because when you're designing a configurator using the new UI, you don't specify where you want the field. You specify that you want fields, and it will draw them for you. So it's different.
The other thing I would say is, generally speaking, to my knowledge, any of those, like what we used to call user guides, and I just finally opened this configurator tech ref guide, are, as far as I know, they're not planning to update these to the Kinetic UX, because all of this content is considered to be updated in the help and support content. So I would say look at that first and see, have you dug a little bit into that yet?
Not from the active homepage.
Okay. Yeah, I would check there. I think that what you'll find is most of the content that was in those user guides has already been created in the help and support in an article-based format with screenshots and step-by-step instructions. So, we're trying to minimize the number of different types of content we have and put it all in one place to make it easier for you all to find stuff. But it's still obviously, takes some getting used to. So I would check there first, and then if you can't find what you're looking for specifically, you can certainly drop me an email and I can see if I can find out for you.
Okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Awesome. I know we're still a little ahead of schedule. We got, I think, 1 more minute in this. Any other questions? Well, we got the chumps. We can peg them against the wall. See how I avoided being part of that?
Very well done.
Yeah, I actually have to drop for another meeting, so just in the nick of time, right?
Many thanks, Tim and Amy and all the other Epicor people. For us new guys, this is pure gold.
Great. Well, it's
welcome.
great to be a part. I'm glad I was able to join I was, kind of in and out today around other things. But yeah, it's great to hear what you guys are talking about and be able to offer some assistance.
Yep.
Never a dull moment. Well, hey, everybody, this kind of concludes our fourth quarter meeting. This will be the last one for the year. We'll resume again in February. We'll send out the minutes of the meeting with the meeting dates for next year. And we'll keep everyone updated as to when we're going to try and do the face-to-face meetings next year, or the in-person meetings in the local regions, as well as kind of make sure we'll try and put together a get-together or something down at Insight so we can all kind of spend some elbow time down there as well. If you do have any questions, if you're willing to be a presenter, by all means, go ahead and send in an email, send in the question. We'll go ahead and see if we can find somebody if you would like something. There is a survey at the end of the meeting. If you can go ahead and fill that out, you can also throw in any requests for presentations. Again, a big thanks to everybody that joined in and was a presenter today and kind of made the Stump the Chump really work here this afternoon, as well as all the presentations during the day. I'm going to bid everybody a hey, gobble till you wobble. Have a safe and happy holidays, and let's make it over to 2022.
Yay. All right, thank you.
Thank
Awesome.
you.
Thanks, everyone.